So I wanted to start then by welcoming a person who got a lot of this show on the road. He might be surprised to hear that. But Michael Davern, local farmer and I guess community leader and I don't know, eco-social entrepreneur, I guess, among many things, but essentially a farmer who's brought a whole community with him in terms of farming for nature and farming for the environment. So Michael, the podium is yours.
Good morning, everybody. Isn't it absolutely wonderful to be meeting in person once again after 2 years? We're absolutely delighted, and thank you all so much for coming. I would like to give a very special welcome to Minister Hackett, who is taking time from a very busy schedule to be with us today. By your presence, you're lending your support to EIPs and to the farmers on the ground, and we really do appreciate it. I suppose the first EIP was really here in the Burren, and the genius of Brendan Dunford, he touched it in his address there, is his ability to listen. And he tackled us, the farmers, and challenged us to come up with solutions to the problems that we had. And we quickly organised ourselves and got trackways made into remote parts of the farms so that we could deal with issues that were there, the cutting of the scrub, the grazing out of the winterages so the light got in and the flora could come back to its former glory and achieve its full potential. And of course his team and himself came up with a very unique scoring system so that we can measure the environmental improvement on our farms. But those scores doubled up to act as a mechanism to pay us, the farmers. And the better we farmed and the better environmentally we farmed, the more money we earned. Now you, the EIPs from all over the country that are here today, are probably saying to yourself, he's talking about our scheme. And I am. Because the template created here in the Burren is what's been used right across the country to measure the environmental improvement in an EIP, whatever the reason, whether it's from the hen harrier or the pearl mussel or many of the other EIPs that are now being created. And it's absolutely wonderful that you're all coming here to the Winterage School, the mothership, to meet with each other. And sometimes when you're on your own, in your EIP, in your own area, you wonder, does anybody else care? You're treading a new path. Your fellow farmers out on the ground are wondering what the hell you're at and why are you doing it. And it's a very lonesome place. And that's why it's so important to have an event like this, that we can all come together, share our stories, learn from each other. And I, for one, am really looking forward to the presentations the second half of the day to hear how farmers are meeting the challenges, the difference that they're making, and how we will have a better environment to hand on to the next generation to come. So the best of luck today, and I'm looking forward to the remainder of the conference. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michael. And without further ado, I might invite Minister Hackett to join us on the stage here. So as Michael said, we're delighted to have Minister Hackett here, and she's been with us a couple of times this year. She took time out to visit us in the Burren programme and to launch a little EIP here with the Burren Bio Trust called the Harris Corner. And my colleague Pranjali, and I think Karen here as well, we might mention that as well later. But I'm really delighted to welcome you here, Minister. Thank you so much for your support by being here and the support of your department in terms of the EIPs and the future of these EIPs. There's a lot more work to do. We all recognise that, a lot more detail to be worked out, but we're really glad to have you on our side. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Brendan. And look, it's truly my pleasure to be here today. When I took office a year and a half ago, look, I was familiar with the EIP programs, and people would roll, the hen harrier project, the Burren, all of those were familiar to me. But I think just getting the in-depth appreciation for how they work, the involvement and the immense hard work that people put into them has given me a bigger, more profound appreciation of what goes on. And thank you, Michael, also. I mean, I think a farmer who has brought a whole community with them. I mean, what an accolade that is, and you know, it's just wonderful, and I think it epitomises everything brilliant about these schemes. So really, just thank you all for the invitation today. I see we've got 14, I think, of the 57 EIP projects here today, plus Derek McLaughlin, I think, from the Wild Atlantic Nature Life EIP, or Life IP. So I think there's going to be a great circulation of information and knowledge, and I think to share the learnings from this is going to be incredibly important. Look, Brendan, we have to acknowledge you and you know, the way you developed the hybrid model, the template of engaging with farmers, engaging with communities, and that locally led approach has just opened it up for so many other groups around the country. And look, just thank you for that. You know, you always need someone to light the fire and to strike the match at the start, and you certainly have done that. And look, our EIPs here in Ireland are recognised internationally as a model that works. And I think, again, that is just in part to everyone who's pulled together for that. And I think we get a lot of criticism about a lot of our agri-environmental schemes and the measures we roll out, but certainly the EIPs have delivered. They've delivered for our environment, delivered for habitats, and delivered for farmers and communities, and that's all we can ask. So well done to everyone on that. I think, you know, the fact that many of the projects sometimes require, not always, but sometimes require a significant change in farming practices, and practices farmers have maybe been doing for generations. I think that the training and the knowledge transfer that has occurred to bring those farmers along, again, is a credit to the people involved. Look, I'm not originally a farmer. I would call myself a farmer now, but I'm married to a farmer, and I know how stubborn farmers are, and they don't like to be told what to do. You have to nurture them along. So well done on being able to unlock that, and well done to the farmers also who have engaged. And I know a lot of the EIP projects, when they are announced, there's a sort of a tentative nature of farmers. Will we or won't we get involved? But I think we've seen over the number of years that they have been running that more on the outside are looking in saying, well, that doesn't look so bad, and can I get involved? And again, that's reflective of how successful they've been. You will know we are at the I suppose the cusp of designing or finalising the designs of a new common agricultural policy model, and I suppose I've worked hard in the department from my perspective to ensure that we do bring on board those teachings and learnings from the EIPs, and you will see that has we have seen a bit of an evolution in the agri-environmental scheme for the future. Look, there's still a little bit of work to be done on that, but I think there has been a step change made in that regard, and I think that is to be welcomed, and certainly this is something we just need to keep building on, cap after cap, or year after year, decade after decade. You know, at some stage it would be lovely to think that the whole country would be involved in something like this, and farmers in all parts of the country, whether there might not be anything very obvious for them to do initially, but there's always something we can be doing for habitats, for environment, for species, and I want the whole island at some stage that every farmer, that they're getting paid delivering something that delivers for the area that they live in. And really, I suppose the lines that I've been using recently, the needs of the land have to come first in an agri-environmental scheme, because that's what it's there for. And we're moving towards that, so I'm pleased with that. What else have I got here? Let's get through these notes. Yeah, so I mean, really, I'm looking forward to, I'll be here until maybe about 1:30 or 2, so I'm looking forward to seeing the first session anyway, and I'll try and catch, is it being recorded, or are they? Roadway, good. Well, that's great. I'll look forward to catching up on the rest as well. I'm also delighted to announce today that all eligible groups who are due to finish their projects before the end of 2023 can apply to my department for an extension of their contracts. So if you are in that sort of phase where you might be running short or running out before the end of 2023, you know, please do get in touch with my department. Details will be issued shortly from the locally led section in Johnstown Castle. And really, I suppose that's a commitment on my department's behalf to reward you in your work well done. Finally, look, I think the it goes without saying how successful the EIP programs have been. And last year, in last year's budget, I secured, it was 1.25 million for a sort of smaller versions of those. We were calling them the mini EIPs. In fact, we were so oversubscribed, the budget was expanded to 3 million, and I've secured another 5 million for next year for these sort of smaller on-farm community biodiversity initiatives. So hopefully we can build on those. Projects like the Hare's Corner were successful last time out. So I hopefully announce more details soon on that, but hopefully that's another scheme that will bring more innovation into the fold. But look, I'll finish on that, and just to say I am looking forward to hearing the presentations, as I'm sure you all are. And look, best of luck in the Burren Winterage school and the programme, and the cattle moving on, when is that, Sunday? Sunday. So haven't managed to get to that. Sometime I shall. But listen, thank you very much, and enjoy your day. Thank you.
Okay. So that's it. I'm going to hand over now to the chair of the first of our 3 sessions today, and I'm delighted to welcome from the National Rural Network, who have been very supportive of the EIPs, Dr. Maura Farrell. Maura, the stage is yours.
Thanks, everybody. I don't know if anybody ever has been involved in Scoring an Oak, but when I walked out here, I kind of felt like I was coming on stage for Scoring an Oak. So I hope we have as much entertainment as we did in Score down through the years. But it's absolutely great to be here. Like as Brendan and Michael and the Minister has said, really, you know, the operational groups in and around EIP-AGRI are absolutely the epitome of what is absolutely good about a multi-actor approach in and around agriculture, in and around farming, around research. So it's so good to be here today to be able to display these. And having been involved in this right from the word go, it's even better to see it at this stage. So I suppose I want to acknowledge my own colleagues, as Brendan said, particularly Shane, who put a huge amount of work into getting the people together here today. Maybe as a little bit of a difference, we decided to bring along an illustrator with us today. So Ruth is down here, and Ruth is actually illustrating, rather than having cameras and photography and everything else, Ruth is illustrating what's going to happen today. And I think in some ways an illustration, it's really good. I think it brings together what the Burren is all about, that culture, that heritage, that idea of art and culture. So I think that was an addition for today. So my job really is, I suppose, initially to give you a flavour. Maybe there are people here today that are not fully au fait with operational groups, with EIP-AGRI. So before we start and before we bring on the experts to the stage, I'm just going to give you a quick idea of what it's all about. And I have a clicker here, so we're going to move ahead. So I suppose, just to give you that kind of idea, where all of this has started, where it has come from, where the idea of European innovation partnerships has come from. And really, it is a European initiative, and Michael is absolutely right. I think they took a lot from the Burren, they took a lot from Brendan, they took a lot from the ideas in Ireland in order to set up this kind of thinking. But the idea of EIP-AGRI, it really is to foster that idea of innovation, bring forward innovation, bring people together in innovative kind of thinkings, not just to do with agriculture. Actually, as far as Europe is concerned, there's 5 EIP groups. And these relate to everything from water to cities to everything. But our main focus here in Ireland over the last number of years has been EIP-AGRI, this idea of agriculture as part of European innovation partnerships. What really is central to EIP-AGRI is this idea of a multi-actor approach. It's this idea, and for many, many years, we've had numerous research taking place in relation to agriculture. But often, and as a researcher myself, hands up, often the research is not as accessible as it should be. So the whole idea of EIP-AGRI is that you bring those researchers, you bring all of those people together, businesses, agri-businesses, advisors, the advisors that have guided farmers for many, many years, bring those together. Bring all of these people under this multi-actor kind of thinking and try and see, can we solve a problem? Try and see, can we create something really positive, innovative and energetic within our countryside, within our landscapes. And this is what EIP-AGRI is all about, that kind of multi-actor thinking, that kind of multi-actor approach. So they brought this together, and I remember talking to somebody in the department the first time we got involved in the National Rural Network, and I spoke to somebody in the department and I said, this is what excites me. Brendan said this earlier on. EIP-AGRI is the most exciting thing to happen in agriculture in the last 2 decades. And I remember the department official saying, yes, but hold on a second. We've been working on this in the background for the last 4 to 5 years. We're tailoring this to exactly what we want within an Irish context. And that's exactly what they did. They wanted that themed call via the hen harrier, the themed call via the pearl mussel, and then they had an open call in and around the environment, and that generalised call as well. And very, very luckily, we've had over the last year a call for an additional peatlands, farm safety, which is a huge issue within Ireland and right across Europe. So really expecting super results to come out of this. And finally, we also had a locally led community initiative as well in relation to community biodiversity. So you can see the money that has gone into this. You can see the multi-actor approach in and around all of this. And again, I suppose thanks again to my colleague in NUIG, Shane Conway. Shane produces a lot of this material that has come as part of Ireland's EIP-AGRI calls. So again, the themed call, 23 of these, 5 of these here with us today to talk directly now, and many more of them, I think, dotted around the audience as well. So these are our themed calls. The new farm safety ones are here as well, and we've got 8 of these. Really, again, looking forward to what's going to come out of these, the innovative kind of practices coming out of these. The locally led farm and community biodiversity projects, fantastic idea of bringing community on board. Farmers are part of community, advisors, researchers, everybody is part of that multi-actor approach. But communities, to bring communities into this again, is really an innovative kind of thinking as well. So I suppose this is where we're at with EIP-AGRI within an Irish context at the moment. And I think our idea here today is not just to celebrate this, but to give you these people, to show you how absolutely innovative their thinking is. And as Minister Hackett said, what we really need to see in the next CAP is we need to see elements of all of these appearing in policy. That's what we need. So without further ado, I think I might maybe invite our 5 speakers up, and then they won't have too far to come, if that's okay with all of you. So we have our hen harrier people. Patricia is here. Yeah, I think we'll invite them up rather than ask them to walk through. Great, Patricia, we'll let you across the way. Lead the women. Great, Henry, thank you very much. Great. So it really was. It was a task in itself to actually pick the 5 people to come here today, and some of them have been so good to all of us in speaking, David as well, have been so good in all of us to speak on many, many occasions. So it's been absolutely fantastic to have all of them here today. So without further ado, I'm going to ask our first speaker. So Fergal, I'm going to ask Fergal Monaghan to come forward first. Now Fergal, in relation to hen harrier, was one of the first people that the National Rural Network went out to speak to about EIP-AGRI. And an absolute no better person to lead a project. Project leader who really has such an ethos in and around biodiversity, in and around protection of our land. So I'm so delighted to introduce Fergal in relation to the hen harrier project.
Thank you very much, Maura. Let's move this to one side. Look, welcome everybody. I'd just like to take this opportunity to talk for a few minutes about what the innovation meant within the hen harrier project. Just for those who mightn't be aware, the hen harrier is a medium-sized hawk-like bird, breeds in uplands across Ireland, is a specialist predator and a good indicator of the overall functioning of its ecosystem. If we want to do anything for hen harriers, we have to work for the benefit of the other species that it shares those habitats with, and for the farmers that have moulded the landscapes and habitats that those species occupy. So what do we mean by innovation? Innovation can be new ways of doing things, or it can be doing new things. But I like to think that what we need is to be innovative in our thoughts, innovative in how we identify the challenges we face, how we focus and how we organize and how we focus the resources that are available on delivering solutions. Innovation can take many forms. It can be technical, and the Hen Harrier project, for example, introduced wild bird cover strips as the fastest way of creating more food for the prey species that hen harriers depend on. We developed mob grazing with horses as a technique for controlling fire risk with millennia and also for managing gorse in a friendlier way. And we also worked with industry to develop feed blocks. These feed blocks were designed to address the nutritional deficits that faced by cattle grazing on a summer diet of millennia, but also to give farmers an additional tool to help them focus grazing where it was required. Innovation can be administrative. And in the Hen Harrier project, we recognize the scale of the challenge faced by all of the parties within the program. Advisors working for the Hen Harrier project assess about 17,500 fields a year. Hen Harrier project staff verify about 2,000 of those, and we also monitor about 250 commonages a year. So this is an enormous task to be carried out in a very short window. And the only way of achieving it is to have the advisors and to have our staff in the field doing the work, not back in the office doing data entry. So we developed an app as a tool for advisors to input data rapidly into the field. And that also created other possibilities. The data that's submitted is geotagged and time-stamped, and that helps us verify that the advisor was in the field at the moment of the assessment. It creates a digital trail from the point of assessment to payment and addresses the audit concerns connected with results-based programs. We also introduced the concept of a Hen Harrier dividend, which is a payment that's given to farmers as a recognition of how well hen harriers have done in their area. It gives them a stake in the welfare of the species. It brings the farmer to see the hen harrier not as a problem, but as a resource, and most particularly a shared resource, a resource that they share with the community and their neighbours. We also developed local area partnerships, and this is where our local project officer, 2 or 3 of the more active advisors in that area, and a group of farmers actually set the training policy for that area. They identify the training needs and help organise and deliver field-based training. We've also looked at developing a screening system for actions to ensure that there's any risks are mitigated. And that screening system is driven by data, and we look on data as a resource. It's not simply a mechanism of calculating a payment. It informs all the other aspects of the program. It gives us the ability to rapidly screen very large numbers of applications for support and actions. It gives us the ability to plan the delivery of those support and actions to ensure that there's no unnecessary disturbance. It allows us to target training where and when it is needed. For example, the people in the top picture there were attending a Japanese knotweed course. And we picked that up from the data that was submitted by advisors. We were able to map that, see where there was concentrations of Japanese knotweed, and organise specialist training for farmers in that area. Innovation can also be at a landscape level, where we bring in landscape interventions. And I'll just show you some of the examples we've done of this are on the left there you can see a roost box for lesser horseshoe bats. And that's a species that will benefit in terms of its food supply by habitat improvements. But it depends on suitable winter and summer roosts. So if they're not available, the species won't be able to utilize the improved habitat. So by providing these interventions at specific locations, we can optimize the ecosystem outputs from the work that farmers are doing. We also developed the idea of post-fire recovery plans, where, unfortunately in Ireland, after a fire is put out, the story tends to go out. So we've been looking at how do we break out of this cycle of fire recovery, and manage the recovery to produce a more resilient landscape. In some parts of the areas we operate in, we have little or no surface water. West Limerick is a very good example where if you take the care to look at a map, there are no ponds or lakes in West Limerick. And that means that in the event of fires in West Limerick, the option of aerial firefighting is unavailable because helicopters cannot travel excessive distances with full water loads. So to address that need and to improve the effectiveness of firefighting in West Limerick, we introduced these multi-purpose ponds. The one that you see there has a capacity of 1 million litres. It can supply enough water to fill 250 Bambi buckets for an Air Corps helicopter. By itself, it creates the capacity for aerial firefighting over 40,000 hectares in West Limerick. Land contains habitats, contains forestry assets, contains farmland, and contains homes. So it's a very good example of something that's been delivered on a farm but provides a service to the entire community over a much larger area. These kind of capital works, they cost money, not enormous amounts in the overall scheme of things, but we have to ensure that within the CAP strategic plan, that the capacity to focus resources at point sites like that to address landscape level challenges is there. The COVID pandemic affected the project in a lot of different ways, and one of the most serious ones was the inability of the project to engage with farmers in organised training during the lockdowns. So to help mitigate that, we developed a series of training films, which have been very well received, thankfully. And links to these films were texted to relevant farmers so they could watch them. We've engaged with education. We support 2 students doing PhDs in GMIT, and we've worked with Munster Technical University to develop a master's programme in agricultural innovation. We also participate in the UCD Food Shield programme. Innovation can also be social and cultural. Hen harriers share a landscape with communities. If we want to do anything for hen harriers, we have to recognise that. We have to bring the community along with us. So we've invested with schools, with sports clubs, community groups, in developing facilities across the SPA network. So you can see here an example of the one on the left there is Munfluck Primary School in Cork, and they've a fantastic statue of a hen harrier as part of what they've delivered with our support. So this takes up less than 1% of our budget, but makes an enormous difference in terms of engagement with the community. We also use traditional field names. Advisors can input them through the app so that when we're sending documentation to farmers, we talk the farmers' language. We don't use alphanumeric codes to identify fields. We use the same names that the farmer would use. At its simplest level, a results-based programme is about collecting data and using that to define a result or progress towards the desired result and calculating a payment. But the Hen Harrier Project's approach, how we've tried to bring together all of those different types of innovation, is about much more than that. It's about using data, using our relationship with stakeholders to create a multi-strand approach to delivering a solution. And to date, we think, it's far from perfect, but to date we think it's been relatively effective. Under pressure here for time now, so I'll reassure you that I won't be much longer. The result to date is that we have a programme that was started from scratch that now engages with over 1,600 farmers. We have a panel of 67 trained advisors, advisors that have given, I see some of them here today, that have given up a lot of their time for every year for training and project-related work. We've developed our own resilient administration system. The hen harrier population has stabilised after many years of decline. In fact, this year the number of breeding pairs is up about 8% compared to when the project started. What do we need now? Well, I think we need to look on the future. I think we can compare it to a rope, and a rope has different strands. And it is those strands that give the rope strength, and the more of them we lose, the weaker the rope gets, possibly to the point of failure. So there's a wide range of stakeholders involved in addressing these challenges, and we have to have a system that brings them all with us and enables them to contribute in the way that they're best able to. So just as I finish, I'd just like to say that the Hen Harrier project is about a lot more than hen harriers. It's about a landscape and about all the people that live there and the species and habitats that they share it with. I think if we recognise that fact and mould our approach around it, we have every prospect of success wherever the project might be and whatever the specific targets are. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Virgil, thanks a million. Definitely our first and fantastic example of an EIP-AGRI project. I think we'll hold a few questions and comments maybe until the end, and we'll keep our group of people up here. So our second project, the McGillicuddy Reeks project, and I'm going to call on Patricia Dean as the project manager of the McGillicuddy Reeks project. Now, Patricia, prior to her life, I presume at this stage, as a manager of an EIP-AGRI project, was a rural recreation officer in County Kerry, and she brought a huge amount of experience from that, but I'm sure she's gained a huge amount of experience from her management of the McGillicuddy Reeks project as well. So to hear about this, we'll pass you over to Patricia. Thanks, I need to click. You're just next. Perfect.
Thanks, guys, and thanks to everyone for being here. And thanks for coming with me. I brought up some of our own crew today, our project ecologist, who's done Trojan work, and I'll tell you more about her in a minute. Thanks to Shane, Maura and Brendan and Michael, because when I came up here years and years ago, I think presenting first at the first Winterage, I was a rural recreation officer. Did not know anything really about ecology or any of that, so I learned an awful lot, but I was inspired when I was here. And I really mean that. It was absolutely inspiring meeting the farmers, seeing the story and see what could be done. Okay, so I won't talk about that forever. So guys, this is us, the McGillicuddy Reeks European Innovation Partner Project. So just to give you an idea, because when I was talking to Owen actually earlier in the week, Owen was like, Jesus Trish, whereabouts are you? So I was describing the landscape. So I think the couple of photographs are probably the best way to actually describe the landscape. So it is obviously Ireland's highest mountain. We're hugely challenging terrain, there's no doubt about it. The biggest part, I suppose, of our project is working closely with the farmers, and it's looking at the improvement of the habitats, because we feel strongly that if the habitats in the area are in good condition, then everything else will follow through in that. So the habitats we're looking at are wet heath, dry heath and blanket bog predominantly, okay? So that gives you an idea of the landscape that we're working in. Now there's annual work plans, so we're a very small project team. I work full-time on it. I have Mary, my trusted ecologist, who works part-time, and we have a part-time administrator. And I must commend Mary, guys, because for one woman, she can do an awful lot of work in at a very short space of time. So every year we sit down with the farmers, we review all the work that was done, we look at work that wasn't done, and we look at changes. We have to work with the farmers. It has to work for them. So we're not dictating to them, but we're just trying to bring them along. And recently I've been using the analogy of, if I told any of you here in the room today, go out and make me a Victoria sponge cake, would you know how to do it, guys? You're not going to know how to do it, probably, I'd be very surprised, it might surprise me, without the recipe. The farmers are no different. This is all very new to them as well. They were not aware of what habitats they had. They were not aware of the species that are living on their land. So a big part of us is actually explaining to them what's there and how we need to improve conditions on the ground, okay? So guys, just to give you a geographical context then, it's a huge SAC that we're working in. The majority of the land is a special area conservation. But we're also smack bang inside in the biosphere. So there's only 2 biospheres in Ireland, and we're one of 2. The other one is actually in Dublin Bay. So 2 very, very different biosphere areas, but we're one of 2 areas. So it's a huge SAC, and that's our little boundary there in red in the centre. So it looks tiny on the map now, which is really a bit of a no-nomer because it's about 9,000 hectares. And like you can see from the photographs, the land is fairly challenging. Okay, so that's just a bit of context for anyone that hasn't been down. So guys, what are we actually doing then on the ground? So we're looking at the impacts of controlled grazing. So one of the habitat assessments that was done back in 2019, you can see here, not a huge amount of vegetation at all, very, very bare ground. And a lot of that would have been down to overgrazing. So we were trying to figure out, right, what do we do about this? What would be the most practical measure now to try and get back good habitat condition here? So we worked with the farmer and he fenced a huge area for us, 20 hectares. And we did some controlled grazing on that. We basically excluded the livestock for a period of time to allow the habitat to replicate. Now, lads, you can see the difference. The farmer himself can see the difference. It was a huge ask, and he got nothing from this financially, only the time to put up the fence and the cost of putting up the fence, the materials. But you can see the difference straight away, and that's in a very, very short space of time, okay? So again, it's new. So that was just done in 21. And then obviously cattle, because we know the cattle need to be there for the summer months for the grazing. So we introduced a bed and breakfast type system where instead of getting the farmers to buy the cattle and then they're trying to manage the cattle over the winter months and they end up with all the other issues that we know are issues when you have cattle, we said borrow them in, keep them for a couple of weeks, they do the grazing and then they go back to their original owner again. And that seems to be working very well on the ground as well. So guys, bracken management is not straightforward. It's definitely not straightforward when you have no access with machinery up to the mountain, okay? And that is predominantly the case for most of our sites. It has to be done by hand. But we're looking at a range of measures. But we are really strongly supporting the idea of working together. Because guys, for anyone to put 16 litres on their back and carry it up the mountain, and 16 litres will do you very, very little bit of work. You need more than that to do a hectare. It's some ridiculous figure altogether to do 1 hectare. We support working together, okay? And that's really important because our future, guys, is not looking great in some of these areas. We don't have a lot of young farmers getting involved in this kind of farming. They find it very, very challenging. They're not making a lot of money out of it. So this is why we're saying work together, build up the skills. So that's the treatment of it with Asilox. We've also looked at cutting back or trimming back the bracken. Now this again is labour intensive, probably not as labour intensive as the spraying, to be honest, but cutting it back twice a year. So again, you can see your results. You know what you've cut back and you know what you've missed. And again, as we're looking at reducing herbicide use, this is probably going to be something that will have to be looked at more into the future. So again, it's just a range of different measures because every single mountain, guys, every single farm, every single commonage is different. No 2 are the same. So you can't have the same approach across the landscape because everything is very different, okay? So, and we're also looking at trampling it. When the cattle are there and the cattle are doing a bit of grazing, we do try and encourage them into these areas of bracken to trample it because we know trampling is a very, very effective way at knocking back bracken, okay? So they're just 3 different measures being used on bracken. Again, guys, this is the lads bringing up water pipes and they brought up an IBC tank by hand onto the side of the mountain because we need water. You can't carry out this work without water. You can't have livestock grazing without water. So we had them doing loads of preparatory works for us. Now these 2 guys, you'd know that they're involved in Kerry Mountain Rescue by the way they approached taking the IBC tank up that mountain. So this got what happened to me on a Saturday. Did I feel guilty? I felt awful because asking them to do this work for us, guys, it's not easy. But the buy-in we had, we were totally oversubscribed. We had to say no to a huge amount of our farmers. They want to be part of the project and our limitation was our budget. And our staff, we'd probably need about 20 more Mary Toomies, but that's a different story. So again, guys, the innovation, and this is, I suppose, just looking at what can we do innovatively, we came up with the old idea of the ramp pump. So the ramp pump doesn't require anything else at all, it's just pressure. And obviously there's a lot of water in the mountains, the water is just not always in the right places, okay? So you're not looking at any fuel source here, it's just pressure. So my dear brother was commandeered to make some of these for us and set them up on the mountains for the farmers, okay? And guys, simple thing, we have plenty of rainwater falling out of the sky every day of the week when we don't want it. So we had them putting barrels. So other people were like, what are they doing on that mountain? The place was becoming a little bit covered with barrels being spread all over. But again, look, we're just trying to be practical. What's the easiest way to gather the water required for these measures? Okay, so we think this is very innovative. Other people might say it's crazy, but we call it innovative. Okay. So guys, heather management. We did a demonstration event with a little RoboCut, and people go, what's a RoboCut, Trish? RoboCut is a remote control machine. And when we were trying to identify a site, we said we'd try and look at, now we were looking at mature heather that's probably degenerate heather, okay? So we brought the RoboCut, and I asked Mary to identify a site where we could bring it to trial it. So Mary said, well, look, if we're going to try it, let's try it in a really difficult place. So we brought it halfway up the side of Carntool, and it made it up there. Okay, now we're going to go back and reassess what the condition of the ground is like afterwards. It did work, but we brought it to a site that wasn't particularly rocky. And anyone who knows their mountains and their geology knows generally that mountains are rocky old places. So it wouldn't be suitable for everywhere, but it did work. Okay. Again, we got the guys, another bit of a mad notion, what we're called it innovation, cutting heather by hand, cutting out that mature degenerate heather. Okay. And again, this is really labour intensive. But again, guys, you won't always get the conditions right to do a controlled burn. So we said we'd look at this instead. So we're cutting it out by hand. And again, what we're doing with the cut out heather, for the mature heather, we're using it as a seed source. So those areas that we have treated for bracken, instead of having bare ground, we can now use it as a seed source. Does that make sense? Yeah. I'm glad to see some nodding heads. At least a few people are understanding what we're doing below. Okay. So rhododendron, and guys, we have a conference, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, coming up on rhododendron management, a huge challenge. So there is just our baseline data, because again, we had no baseline data. We did not know the extent of the bracken. We did not know the extent of the heather. We did not know the extent of the gorse, the firs, whatever the issues. Everything had to be mapped before doing anything. So we mapped our rhododendron sites, and we did a lot of this in conjunction actually with the National Parks and Wildlife Service, and we're very grateful for that. But you can see one of the sites there alone, guys, has a level 4 infestation level of 40 hectares. And that's just one site, okay? And that's a level 4 infestation level. So it's a huge challenge. It's not going to go away. It needs to be thought about because it is an issue. Not just in the McGillicuddy Reeks. I'm talking to the guys at the Moormount of Connemara, and they're also having the same challenge. So we're just trying to share our learnings there, because everything we're doing, we're quite happy to discuss with everybody else so we can work together to get the real solutions. So what did we do, guys? Well, we obviously had to carry out all the baseline mapping. For anyone who hasn't seen Rhododendron Ponticum, there you go, and it's all its glory. It's beautiful, purple flower. If anyone says that to me today, lads, just run after saying it, okay? Because it is hugely challenging. So what are we doing? Well, we're obviously treating it. There is only one way, unfortunately, to treat it, but it's direct stem treatment, so it's really, really efficient. So you're using very, very little of the herbicide. But then afterwards, we're left with horrible, dense, dead clumps of rhododendron brash. So what we decided to do, again, my brother, guys, is called upon a lot of the time to support the project. We came up with the idea of a burning frame. We didn't want to burn huge areas of rhododendron brash and leave areas of bare ground, because it burns really hot. It's got a really high calorific value. So we said we'd burn it off of the ground. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah? So that's the before and after. So at the moment now, I was challenging some of the students that were out with us yesterday when they were looking at ideas for projects from the Munster Technological University. If they're looking for fourth-year projects, I have lots of ideas for research on rhododendron that they can be undertaking. Can we use it? Maybe can we turn it into charcoal? Could it be used as a biofuel? Could it be turned into wood pellets? Maybe could it be used as a fertiliser, as like potash type idea? So yeah, lads, any researchers looking for ideas, please do give us a ring. We're no shortage of ideas. So again, guys, time was up. No bother. I'm nearly there. So working together. We've talked to farmers and they have struggled, and they've said we can't do it by ourselves. So we talked to other farmers that were looking for part-time work, and we said, would you be interested in working together? It is absolutely, guys, the single most important thing that we did. And it has worked so well, because they're working together. If you were trying to deal with 40 hectares of rhododendron by yourself, you would fail. Simple as that. Okay? So what we've done instead is we've trained up local people, not necessarily always farmers, other people in the local community, because obviously in Kerry, tourism related, there's a lot of seasonal employment. The social impact of this, guys, as well as doing it environmentally in the right way, and the return to the local economy, building the skills locally, keeping the skills locally, and getting the return. The money is going back into the local community. I've spent days out with them. The day flies. And you know what, guys? You have the crack. So if anyone wants to volunteer to come down to do some rhododendron, there's no shortage of it. Okay, so that's it, guys. Training is hugely critical. We bring our farmers out. We do indoor and outdoor sessions. Like I said, we do annual reviews with them. But it is a case of this is all very new to them, okay? So constant back and forth with all our farmers. We paste ourselves in an old Garda station in the middle of the community. They can pop in whenever they want, and that really works as well. So this is just a lot of the other work we're doing. Great characters around the place. You have to have lots of cups of tea. We go into the national schools, the secondary schools. Again, these are our hopeful future farmers. So it's engaging with them as well. And obviously then our schools and our secondary schools and our universities as well. So we work very closely with the Munster Technological University, and we'll be working with UCCs shortly. Okay, so that's it, guys. I'm nearly there. We obviously have a huge issue because everyone wants to climb Carntool. It's on the bucket list. So we've huge numbers. So we do an awful lot of survey work. We have designed an app so we can gather all the data. So we're asking people, what do they know about the impact of their visit on the McGillicuddy Reeks? Are you concerned about erosion on the reeks? Because with the figures, guys, we have 239,000 people, just under 250,000 people in 2018. The ground, it's a special area conservation, it can't sustain that. Okay, so a huge amount of our work, and this is what we had the students doing yesterday, creating path restoration remedies for us. So there's just giving you an example of some before and after works that were done on previous projects, but we have to maintain this work because you can see that can't continue. We'll get down, and it's not just the McGillicuddy Reeks again, it's areas all over the country. So that's it, guys. So I'll just finish up now. We have the Rhododendron Workshop coming up. If anybody wants to come down, please do so. You'll learn all about rhododendron, how to treat it. You'll hear from the experts and the non-experts, because Maura said that she was going to have experts up here. So I don't know who she was talking about, but I don't know. And keep an eye out, guys, as well. We've been nominated for an International Mountain Protection Award. So we hope to hear more about that soon. We'll hear about that maybe coming up to Mountain Day. But we've been nominated. It's an international competition. So thank you very much.
Patricia, thanks a million. She spoke in the beginning about, you know, being inspired, coming here a few years ago. Like, really, listening to this lady, you cannot but be inspired. She really has not just taken this project on, but she has really energised the whole of the community down there in relation to this project. And there's so many words that you can take out of that, from multi-actor to people to inspiring. We talk about funding, but you know, when you have people behind it, the funding is the secondary part of it. Very, very important, but the people really is what makes these projects. And that brings us on to our next project. So we've got the Danu project, and we've got David Wallace really standing here in the wings for us. And again, another person who really has every background, from advisory to farming to everything. But when it comes to drivers of projects from a scientific background, David really has pulled out every stop in this. So he has been absolutely fantastic. A project that really needs to be looked at by so many people from governments here and in Europe, as does all the projects. So I'm going to let David talk to you and tell you all about his project, the Danu project.
See if I get this right. Next. Okay. Good morning. I'd like to say thank you on behalf of our 12 Danu farmers for the invitation to come here and give an update as to our progress to date on the project. I appreciate the time is short, so I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. The substance of what the Danu project is about is a transition from a conventional farming approach to a biological farming approach. And in a biological farming approach, the main criterion is to develop soil biology populations to the point of where that they're extremely robust, and they basically are in a position to facilitate excellent crop growth, excellent grass growth. And it's a process. It's not something that can happen overnight. It's a transition period that's needed. And our project has been 3 years in trying to establish as to what's involved in transitioning farmers from a conventional farming type of approach, high NPK usage, potential for environmental distress, as we call it, as a consequence of overloading some of these inputs and high stocking rates, etc. So the principles of biological farming. The first one is farm management, agronomy and animal husbandry focus on optimizing soil biology populations and their function. And then over time reduce and eventually cease applying certain fertilizers and all pesticides which impede optimal soil biology function. Thirdly, then, develop and maintain living plant covers throughout the entire year to provide a continuous food source for those biology populations, soil biology populations. Increase and maintain plant species diversity in tillage and grassland systems. Minimize soil disturbance and more efficient use of animal manures and biological inoculants. And the benefits then of biological farming, where a transition program has been completed, is improved soil structure and alleviation of soil compaction, increased water infiltration rates, a consequence of improved topsoil structure and depth, and thus to improve water quality in catchment areas, significant reduction in losses of nitrogen from volatilization and leaching, and phosphorus from surface water runoff, a significant reduction in artificial nitrogen use and an increase in nitrogen use efficiency, improved crop and sward quality which benefits animal and human health, increase in levels of carbon sequestration over time, and increase in farm biodiversity. There's an awful lot of boxes being ticked here, and particularly in a commercial farming situation, or basically Irish agriculture. Biological farming as a set of principles covers very, very much the gamut of all we're actually trying to do, from various aspects, from greenhouse gases, environment, etc., and it's all in a single set of principles. So when we started the project, we set up some trial plots, all 12 farms in the projects, half tillage, half livestock. And in 2018, the plot sizes were from 1 hectare and each to a maximum of 2 hectares in size. So they're field size trial plots. In other words, it's field scale that we're actually looking at. So the first plot is a control, which would have followed the Teagasc Green Book regulations. Second plot is a control with all artificial nitrogen and acid phosphate having a carbon buffer applied to it, be that sugar, humic acid, molasses, composted or treated slurries, but the buffer being the key thing. And the third plot then was full mineral balancing, and the fourth plot then is full mineral balancing plus biological inoculants. We took extensive baseline data at the start of the project because we really wanted to establish it on a solid scientific footing as to what we were actually trying to accomplish. And this is the level of baseline data that would have been taken across for every single plot on each of the 12 farms. On the left, you can see a full comprehensive soil test that basically covers soluble nutrients, available nutrients, and total nutrients in the soil. And this was to our own specification that we looked for this test. The central column then is a soil bioassay, which was establishing the actual biology populations, the microbe populations in the soil in the various different groups like bacteria, fungi, nematodes, protozoa, and most importantly, mycorrhizal populations. And the third then was on-site evaluation, like looking at earthworm counts, plant depth, root depth, soil structure evaluation, penetrometer readings, where compaction was taking place, and most importantly, soil infiltration rates. And so we ended up with a very comprehensive set of baseline data. And all I can tell you right now across the 12 farms across 5 counties, not a single soil sample showed minerally balance, a good mineral balance. Not a single soil sample showed a good biological balance and function. And very few showed good water infiltration rates. And on an ongoing basis then, since the baseline data has been taken, we're now in the process of taking midline data for the project, and we'll have endline data at the end of the 5 years of the project. But we use a very sophisticated system of plant sap analysis. And there's only 2 labs in the world that are able to do it, and one is in Novacrop in Holland, and that's the lab that we're using. And this is an analysis of plant sap from any particular plant, be it a grain, be it a legume, be it a grass. And this is allowing us to be much more anticipative of potential problems that we're seeing while we're trying to bring a better nutrition about in the crops and plants, rather than reacting to a problem, which usually costs more and takes more to address if you're reacting rather than anticipating a potential problem. This is an excerpt from the original document proposal that we made in 2017. And I just want to read it because it puts it in context as to what we actually feel we've accomplished with the project to date. It should be noted that the Danu Farming Group are most unlikely to confine their efforts to the trial plots only if positive benefits are seen to occur on those trial plots. As the positive results occur, the expectation is that similar practices will be carried out on the rest of the farm areas. Farmers in general are understandably risk adverse and will be slow to invest in a process if they're not sure of positive results. If towards the end of the project the principles and practices learned are applied to all the farmed land areas, this will be a key indicator of the project's success. In a sense, it is the key performance indicator. I get great satisfaction in being able to tell you, and it's the farmers who've done this for themselves. All 12 farms are now applying biological farming principles to all of their farmed lands. And on the livestock farms, there's been a reduction across the whole farm now. I'm not talking about on the trial plots, across the whole farms, there's been a reduction of artificial nitrogen usage by an average of 35% with no reduction in output. On the tillage farms, there's been a reduction of artificial nitrogen use by 10 to 15% with no reduction in output. Now, the challenge in tillage, in conventional tillage, is going to be much, much greater for three particular reasons. Firstly, soil development or soil quality, soil biology in tillage farms is generally of a much poorer quality simply as a consequence of continuous tillage and the type of systems that have been used in the last 50 years or so in soils, in tillage soils. Grasslands generally tend to have a better biology, not perfect, but better. That's the first thing. The second thing is the seed quality. And all our seeds we're using are imported seeds. We just have no breeding program here. We've no adaptation to our local environment. A deeply, deeply troubling issue over the longer term, and it's something I don't know how we can address it. But heads need to be banged together from many quarters to see if we can do a little bit more on adaptation of seeds and moving seeds to a proper engagement with the local environment. But the second reason is that most of these seeds, commercial seeds, have been bred in a high nitrogen environment. And the third aspect of it is that as a consequence of this high nitrogen environment, their root mass is generally small. And because they're driven by above ground growth rather than below ground root mass. And that lack of below ground root mass is going to make it a much more difficult issue to bring a substantial reduction in nitrogen in the tillage systems. And we're acutely aware of this. But some good news. On insecticides have been reduced by a minimum of 50%. And in fact, in nearly all the farms, in fact, if not all of them, it's actually 100% reduction of insecticides. And that's a huge step at this stage in commercial and on commercial farms. Fungicides have been reduced by 30 to 50%. And all the fungicides we used are used in a preventative fashion. None of them are used in a curative fashion. And so there's always an element of risk for the farmer in a high-value crop over many, many acres. Should I go with a fungicide or should I not go with a fungicide? And this type of reduction is quite substantial. And we're supplementing or supplanting or substituting that fungicidal effort with nutrition, because all plant diseases are based on nutrition, all of them. And all plant diseases, be they from a fungal source, a bacterial source, a viral source, or an insecticide source, they're all based on incorrect nutrition. It's as simple as that in biological farming. And herbicides, which is very difficult in these type of commercial crops where output is need to be maintained. Herbicides have been reduced by 30 to 50%. Our expectation is we should manage to reduce it a bit more. So across the project in the last 3 years, we're very happy that we're making some progress on this. And Danu is not interested in the application of biological farming principles on the basis if it means a reduction in output, because the country's not interested. We simply can't afford to have that kind of an economic attitude that we let it all just sink on the basis that we can't manage it. It's very manageable in the biological farming system. In stating this, though, Danu believed that a balance must be found on a farm whereby an optimum level of output, input costs and profitability is achieved without causing environmental distress. And the true reality is that the reality is that the greatest risk of environmental distress occurs at the marginal financial rate of return. The extra cows which are there at an extra, are there where the margin of profit on those extra bit, as in any business model, although I'm not wholeheartedly in agreement with the application of a standard business model on top of farming as a biological system. But the point is, that's where the most environmental distress is occurring. That's where most of the water catchment areas are suffering, where water quality is poor is suffering, where this intensification is taking place, and exactly the same in the tillage, where yields are too high. At the end of the day, it is profitability is what really matters, and sustainable profits. And that's what we're working actively towards. Now that I've given you the base data of what we have, it's time for a few pictures. Just up on the top left-hand corner here, this is actually the vegetation you can see here is actually the weed groundsel. A groundsel weed, and oats have just been sown into it. This is October. This is a completely turnaround in the way our farmers are thinking, where they're actually using a weed as the cover crop here, knowing that that groundsel will die off when the first frost hits it. But on that basis, it's supplying root exudates, energy to the soil biology. In other words, we're trying to keep green covers there the whole time so that the soil is being consistently fed. The soil biology is being consistently fed. And the oats will take over there and make that a non-issue when it actually comes to harvest. And you can read the titles and some of the others there, but there's a lot going on here. And seed inoculation with something like a vermi wash or seaweed extract is such a critical component in the establishment of a crop. We've seen this over and over again, where seeds are actually inoculated. It's making a huge difference. Down here, we results from just one tillage farmer's trial plots. No real significant difference in actual output from plots 1 to plot 4. And just moving on to another farmer here, you can see a wormery, homemade wormery, and down in the bottom left here, a homemade seed dressing system, completely homemade, a homemade auger, and you can see the vermi juice in the can, and then the seed is being dropped in here. And these are seed trials by the farmer himself. All our farmers are doing this of their own motivation, and they're not being paid for it either. It's a very unusual project. None of the Danu farmers are being paid for any of the work that they're doing. And that's a critical key thing for us, because if it's not from a self-motivation, we don't see the point. Now, that's not to diss or to take away from projects where farmers are being paid. Those projects are set up with a very, very different structure. But for what we're trying to accomplish, we're trying to establish very clearly that farmers need to understand the fundamentals of the scientific fundamentals behind biological farming and what's possible with it. And they need to be self-motivated and motivated simply to accomplish that. And that's why their empowerment is far greater on the basis that they're not being paid as well, simply because they have a choice as to what to do. And we cannot instruct a farmer to do anything on the basis that we're not paying them. There's no instruction to them. There's advice and indications as to what should be done or what's likely to be done. But each individual farmer within the project makes their own decisions as to how far they want to go with this. And I believe it's been very successful for us to date. And wildlife is one big issue that we're seeing on these commercial farms, be it grassland or tillage. The wildlife levels are rocketing. They're absolutely rocketing. Now, I know there's a component when one first starts taking an interest in wildlife, the fact that you become aware you already immediately are going to see more than you did before. We're all very conscious of that. That'd be a typical of the human condition, is that it's only when you're aware of something suddenly there's more of it. But taking that into account, the reality is on these farms, there is a massive increase in biodiversity taking place. This is a crop of beans. I just had to put this up. The health and the quality of this bean crop is just astounding on a commercial farm. And no fungicides, no pesticides, and the seed would have been inoculated and treated. And this, to me, a picture speaks 1,000 words. And again, we can see fungal activity in stubble here, more wildlife, beautiful inodulation on these young bean plants here, right, and nodulation of rhizobia. Again, you can see the clay, or on the seedling is tightly bound as a consequence of the exudates being released by that plant. And that plant has been strongly stimulated at the start by having the seeds treated, and it's pushing out sugars and creating great biological function, and there's a great exchange then of minerals by the biology to the plant, and in exchange the plant then is getting energy that it needs. Up to 40–45% of photosynthetic energy is actually used to feed soil biology. And it's so important, right, that there's sufficient energy, and this is why in our project we've concentrated on nutrition of the plants in this transition stage, because if the plants have not got the nutrition and balanced, they're not in a position subsequently to deliver a sufficient portion or partition of photosynthetic energy to the soil biology, which then in turn begins to start accessing the parent material for many of the minerals that the plant actually needs. And it's a whole symbiotic relationship that we're trying to encourage in our approach. All right, just nearly done. This is we're growing chaps as well as cattle. This is you can see what's been. I'm consistently seeing higher Brix readings across the plots from P1 to P4, from Brix readings around 4 to doubling them in 8. Brix reading is a level of the sugar levels in a crop. And this is very encouraging to actually see on plot 4 versus plot 1 a doubling of the energy levels. And all our livestock farms are moving towards more and more multi-species sward usage. And look at these calves. These would have been mid-February to early March calves, and this is mid-June. They're absolutely stunning. Anybody who's not even a livestock person could say, look, they look absolutely fabulous. Down here you can see the level of work that's involved with farmers in doing this. There's quite a lot of work in doing the four trial plots, and sometimes it can be a bit of a task for them, but I have to say they're making a genuine effort, and we're very happy with them. Again, we can see here multi-species swards with crop, but most, I'm afraid it's cut off here on the slide, why I don't know. But we've gone from 140 units in this slide to 46 units, a quarter of the level of, or thereabouts, or 30% of the amount of nitrogen with no loss in yield. I'm sorry that it's cut off there, but that's that. So this slide was made up by one of our farmers, and it really is emphasizing the things that matter to him as a consequence of being involved in biological farming. And you can see, it's hard to believe that's actually coming from a commercial farm, isn't it? You know, we don't think in our heads of a commercial tillage farm with this kind of approach. And this is really the potential for our future nationally, if we so choose to collectively engage with it. And lastly, we function as a discussion group. And in fairness to the department and Teagasc, they've pushed the notion of discussion groups very well, and there's many KT discussion groups, all working at different levels. But it's a wonderful format for companionship, for engagement, and most importantly, farmers learn quicker from farmers than anybody else. We can talk about advisors, we can talk about the consultants, we can talk about this, that, and the other. But a farmer will listen to a farmer first before he listens to anybody else, and believe him first. So we believe the discussion group format is the way to go, and our intention is for the future, for the last 2 years of the project, is to make invitations to existing discussion groups to actually allow our farmers to have a one-to-one with them on what they've learned and what they've managed to accomplish and what's possible in the future. Thank you very much.
Well done, David. Thanks a million. And I think, as we said, and as you have seen from this again, really epitomises the multi-actor approach. There's so much in this that we now need, that we're now talking about. So it's an ideal project that really brings forward every type of innovation that we're talking about. So well done to Danu Project and to David. Now, guys, these are not the lotto numbers, but would you please just heed, if this is your car, you have to move it, because there's creche people trying to leave with kids. So I'm going to read out a number of cars. One of them I already read out to somebody who's sitting at at our speakers here, but he's moved his. So if you own 181RN, a Toyota 847, you need to move it. If you own a Skoda 141 LD 264, That's our second speaker. If you own a 07W3829, again, a Volkswagen, you need to move it. And if you own a 192C2248, you need to move it. Do you want me to read them out again? Have we all the people gone? Just one quick run, just in case, because there's people from the creche trying to leave. 181RN Toyota 847, 141LD264 Skoda, 07W3829 Volkswagen, and 192C2248. So again, please move them. Okay, that's a nice little interval between our speakers. Okay, our next speaker is from the Duncannon Blue Flag Farming and Communities EIP-AGRI project. And Owen Kinsella, again, one of these people who are managing these projects. And I think when we say managing these EIP-AGRI projects, these are not just managers, these are drivers. These are people who really have taken this on and they've become part of their life. And I think we can hear that from David, we've heard it from Patricia, we've heard it from Fergal. These have now become part of their lives, part of their communities, and Owen is absolutely no exception. A person who is fantastic to us in Inuit Galway. He has come on several occasions to talk for us and for the NRN. He has come again on several occasions to talk to us about projects. So I'm going to hand it over to Owen to talk about the Blue Cannon Blue Flag Farming and Communities EIP-AGRI project.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here. This is probably our first, not our first, but in a long time, I suppose, face to face, and it's great to see so many new faces, so many more EIP projects on the ground. I'm an ag scientist in Wexford County Council. This project is led by Wexford County Council. We were funded this in 2018, so we're about 3 years on the ground now. I suppose, firstly, I want to speak about blue flag statuses. We have 93 blue flags within Ireland. It's great to see so many more awarded each year, but when one is lost, working within an environment section in a county council, you don't want to be there because you're going to hit the ground and you're going to hit it fast. Duncannon Beach is one of the most important beaches in southwest Wexford. We lost the blue flag in 2007 due to the high bacterial levels found. We've 4 main pressures on the beach, 2 of which we look after with the 2 streams flowing onto it. We also have a lot of surface water pipes on Duncannon Beach that do come contaminated from time to time. I suppose being part of the River Nore rising in the Laois Tipperary area, there's a lot of work to be done upstream, and we know this from our water quality results. The other major pressure on us, we've no wastewater treatment facilities in Duncannon, Ballyhack and Arthurstown, all within a kilometre of each other. So there's major pressure there from a human side of things. We are working with Irish Water in a €12.5 million project at the moment that's just hit the ground. So it's good to see this. So there's a lot of money being spent in this area to try get a blue flag back on the beach. Our investigations prior to an EIP, those 2 pictures there, we do a lot of dye testing as part of this project, just to literally future-proof farmyards. Those 2 pictures are very similar, I said. One is from a farmyard, the other one is from a septic tank. So it's not just up to the farmers to fix water quality, it's to look at the domestic houses as well. Prior to this, we had 16 farmyard inspections, or surveys, I suppose, what we would call them, 3 direct discharges. Within a domestic wastewater system, your own septic tank, we had 22 failures. So you can just see the level that we're at. We knew within Wexford County Council that we were limited to that approach, how long that approach was going to last for. So we really needed to change how we approached water quality, how we approached the people in Duncannon. We knew top-down levels weren't working. We needed to switch that around. So what we done was we went along and we done a bottoms-up approach. We started asking the farmers, how will ye fix water? Management was a bit of an issue as well at both levels, both farming and the domestic house side of things as well. So I suppose to first start off within a farmyard, and I suppose with gap regulations, it was very complex. We omitted farmyard measures straight away because we were touching on the basis of the current GAP regulations. And these were areas such as soiled water areas, minimising clean water, storage, silage bales, just down to the basic gutter and downpipe, like, you know. So this is how we approach. This was our, I suppose, innovative approach by providing the farmer with a full-time project manager, and then by listening to the farmer of how they wanted to actually fix their own water course on their own farm. So a PPZ survey, pollution potential zone survey, was designed by Mairead Shore and Con Curtin, two of the authors behind this project. We approached the farmer and we literally just gave them a survey sheet listing everything on their farm, whether it was fencing of water courses, soil water management, clean water diversion, and also tillage sediment loss. Them 3 maps there were given to every farmer. Simple, straightforward, straight to the point, like, and they really just climbed on board when they saw what work they could do by just literally detailing or carrying out the actions that we would have put to them. Our water quality monitoring programme, we carry out water quality assessments 6 times a year. Not only that, to keep a blue flag on a beach, you carry out water quality assessments during the summer months from the middle of May to the middle of September. Thursday was often a throwback Thursday, is what we called in the county hall, given the bacteria levels that we were seeing. But now it's starting to change. We start calling it Thriving Thursday. It was just the kind of, you know, results were getting better and better. We've seen a major change in bacteria levels on the beach and within that catchment. That catchment's about 1,300 hectares, 13.5 kilometres of water course within that. We've 21 farmyards, we've 220 houses within that catchment, and we also have the village of Ramsgrange, thriving village, something like what's here in Kinvara. You'd be astounded. It's a passerby, commuter village, and also very close to Ballyhack Ferry, Waterford City. The issues that we were seeing on the land, one of them was sediment loss. Within Duncannon, we have quite an amount of free draining soils. From time to time, yes, we have quite an amount of poor draining soils. You can see that picture there. That's about knee deep to me, soil straight in to the stream. You could nearly see it for about a kilometre, the fine sediment loss. How we approached it, a lot of our farmers are in Gloss and we're carrying out catch crops. So what we done was we brought the farmers to those farms that were sowing catch crops. They saw the benefits of sowing cover crop, not from a sediment point of view, but from an animal feed point of view, from a soil health, from a soil structure point of view. And we got more farmers on board sowing more cover crops, getting that green cover as early as possible. The fencing of water courses, as I said, 13.5 kilometres. Our farmers added an additional 6 kilometres. All of our water courses are fenced now within the catchment. So we've 13.5 kilometres. Multiply that, it's 27 kilometres both sides of the river, fenced 1.5 metres away from the water course. Water truck locations were another issue. Farmers kind of were seeing, like, right, look at it, I'll pull back my water truck maybe 10 metres. Obvious enough, if you're from an agricultural background or anything like that, or on the land every day, poaching does occur. So what we done was we granted the farmer to move that truck that further distance away, put down that bit of 804 as well. Riparian margins, you can see the top left picture. Some farmers even opted, right, look at, let's not go to 1.5 metre, let's go 3 metres. And a lot of our farmers opted for that. We've seen a major benefit now, some of our lower bacterial levels being found in these areas. Hedgerow establishment, it's a very costly exercise. Some of our farmers would have opted for this, but this action was only taken on board recently because of the EPA's, I suppose, recent development of the PIP maps, the pollution impact potential maps for nitrates and phosphates. So we really was a right measure in the right place. And this is where we established many hedgerows. They could have been 10 metres, they could be 20 metres away. The picture on the right was a willow plantation taken on board by a farmer in 2009, I think it was, 2010. He's doubled the distance to that willow plantation along by the riverbank as well. Roadway sediment loss. Again, another, I suppose, change to the NAP, the recent NAP, was fencing of watercourses and roadways, minimising soil water. You can see the farmers on the left, this picture on the left, this farmer put in an 8x4 sediment trap recently, kind of, I suppose, October 2020. They knew what changes were coming down the line. They knew what they needed to do to fix the water quality. This was a small inversion ramp put in to divert any rainwater, or I suppose soiled water, or greyish water as we call it. And this was another recent picture only this week. You can see the sediment trap that's working well. There's a 2-pipe system in. That has quite a distance to go from the sediment trap point of view to the water course as well. Clever design on the back roads. This is one of another implementation, I suppose, or another action a farmer took on board. He was always being, I suppose, given out by locals for stopping traffic on the road, especially during school times. So he said, right, we'll come up with something kind of innovative that can also minimise soil water. So what basically we done was we went to the roads engineer. We looked at what we could do, and we looked at the cost of it. And basically, the road, this continues up along the road. So we put in 2 tanks, 1, 2 here, where traffic could freely flow at 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the morning. And this is really minimising the amount of soil water coming off here, down along this road to the Corrickmore stream. So we heard about, I suppose, results-based reward system. This is our results-based reward system. You can see farmers that are landing in the red are often, I suppose, categorized. They know that, look, we know where we need to be to get up to the green status. So we've 35 farmers on board. Each of those farmers can fall into a low, a moderate, or high level. But most of our farmers are now in a yellow and green status. We've probably 1 or 2 farmers in a red status. No fault of their own, I suppose. It's just where they are at the moment. They are investing big time now into the farmyard, especially. How do we get community engagement? I would have shown this in our previous, I suppose, talk. This was a family-made sediment trap. They literally didn't, they literally went down to the watercourse one day and started putting stones in an area. And I visited one day and they said, right, let's do another one and do another one. And this is what they're at on their land. They're building their own kind of sediment traps. And this is how we get community engagement. This is how we get families together. I can't dwell enough on education engagement. Every day we go onto the hurling field, even at home, leave nothing behind. We can't afford to leave anybody behind in this. Water quality is not going to change until we start educating people. And this is how we're doing it. That's a manager within Glanbia, a local farmer, our local school, and then that's a local secondary school. But this is how we are looking forward in the next few months to engage with community-based groups, schools, and groups like yourselves. It's vital that we are going to. It's vital that we engage with these people to change water quality, to educate them, and to engage. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Owen, thanks a million. Well done. Well done. Again, there's just so many lessons that we can learn. There's so many lessons that we can learn from everyone here. There's so many lessons we can bring to policy. That's what this is all about today. What can we bring forward? The farmers themselves often have the answers. And bringing them together in this kind of a structure, in an EIP-AGRI project, bringing that structure together, getting the assistance of the additional people, let that be county councils or researchers or whoever, it gives them that sense of value where their voice is heard. And their voice is often so important, and it really brings an answer to an issue that they have. So again, well done to Owen and to the Duncannon Group. Finally, and last but definitely not least, we're going to move right up the country. And Henry O'Donnell is going to represent the Inishowen Uplands Farmer Group. And again, project manager in the EIP-AGRI group. Really, I suppose Henry is somebody who absolutely believes, I think, fully and absolutely in sustainable farming. And this project, and I remember reading this project initially as part of the evaluation group with the Department of Agriculture, and it stirred something in me about community, and it stirred something in me about people in Donegal who really wanted to find answers for themselves. And as Henry has been known to say in the past, we don't want to forget about viability. We want farmers to be viable, but we also want answers to issues that we have. And that's exactly, I think, what they have done. So we let Henry take over and tell you all about his project.
Thank you for that introduction, Maura. I hope I can live up to the expectations she set up. Thank you, Minister Hackett, and everybody here for organising this and inviting me here today from our Inishowen Uplands EIP project. The uplands part maybe is slightly a bit of a misnomer. We're involved in the uplands, but we're also very conscious that our farmers also farm the area between the uplands and the lowlands and everything associated with it. We have always had one very clear vision for our project before we started, when we started to think about the proposal, and that was we wanted to do something to improve the profitability and sustainability of our farms, that we felt we needed a future, and we felt that what we were being provided with in relation to policy wasn't really working for us. We were all involved in environmental schemes. We felt we didn't really have a choice. We had to join these schemes because we needed the additional income associated with the schemes. So I suppose our vision for our project was to try and develop innovative measures that actually delivered for our paymasters, delivered for water quality, delivered for biodiversity, delivered for the environment, but they didn't deliver for the farmer. We felt there was a disconnect between environmental schemes and the practicalities of farming. So our objective, again, was very much, could we not design innovative measures for farmers that actually improved the farmer's lot, improved his financial returns? And we felt with a bit of innovation, there's no reason that the two elements had to contradict each other. We felt we could design measures that would deliver for our paymasters and deliver for our farmers. Now, I know I have only 10 minutes here, and I'm going to try to give you a flavour of what we're doing. I would hope now that we're all putting it out and about again, maybe we can invite a lot of you up to actually see what we're doing. So, in summary, we have 5 measures that we have introduced for our 25 farmer participants in Inishowen. In no particular order, we have introduced cattle back onto the uplands. A lot of the stuff discussed by Tricia, we see those benefits. We also see a financial benefit to the farmer. It's an unused grazing platform. We have introduced agroforestry measures onto the farm. How many times have we heard in the media that every farmer needs to plant a hectare of trees? So we have taken that idea and developed it. We have established diverse clover swards. We have also established red clover swards for forage conservation. And we have introduced the concept of creating ponds to all our farmers. So our cattle on the uplands, there would have been a tradition in Inishowen maybe 50, 60 years ago where cattle were summer grazed on the uplands. Indeed, my grandfather on my own farm would have had black cattle like these on his farm. I farm as well. I'm not a participant in the project, but as Maura said, there's so much history going back here that maybe our ancestors were quite smart in what they done. I have to say I found it actually quite emotional when I reintroduced cattle back onto the uplands that my grandfather had grazed with cattle 60 years ago. I have to say I found a connection with them. But back to reality, why are we doing this? From a financial perspective, there's a very simple prospect that the uplands are a grazing platform that our Inishowen farmers had forgotten how to use with cattle. There's huge benefits for the environment when this is done in a managed way. We remove millennia and dead grasses. We improve the biodiversity. We improve it for ground nesting birds. We remove fire loads. And at the same time, we provide a totally free grazing platform for animals for 4, 5, 6, 7 months of the year for participant farmers. It just makes sense. From a common agricultural policy point of view, it helps to keep this land eligible for payments, because there is issues in areas with undergrazing where sheep have been removed due to, I would have to say, flawed policy 20 years ago. The reality is that it's not as simple as putting back those sheep. They won't survive. Cattle are non-selective grazers. They remove dead material, and they actually improve it for the sheep that can follow on and indeed be reintroduced after them. So there's loads of benefits for the environment. There's loads of benefits for the farmer. Agroforestry. We've all heard the language about planting more trees. And indeed there is an agroforestry scheme available to farmers. We looked at this. No farmer in Donegal in 2016 had ever applied for it. So we looked to see what was happening there. And to be brief, we found one huge issue with the agroforestry as it existed in Ireland at that time. There was a very simple objective of that scheme, and that was to establish forestry. We have a different approach to agroforestry. We feel there's huge opportunity for huge amounts of trees to complement activity on existing livestock farms. It doesn't have to replace them. It doesn't have to replace rural communities. It can be an integrated part of every livestock farm, and it will benefit the farm in terms of disease control, in terms of flood mitigation, in terms of nutrient capture, in terms of shelter for animals, in terms of extending the grazing season. There's huge potential in this. And one of the key things is that land planted in trees must be integrated as part of the farming system. It has to be eligible for all payments, the same as every other hectare. And I would contend maybe it's more eligible for payments than some other hectares in very intensive farming systems. We have planted trees in all types of situations on our participant farms. What you see in the photograph here is where we, on a sheep farm, where we have used tree guards. This is immediately grazable by the farmer the day after the tree's planted. So it's very attractive in that way. It's slightly more expensive. Here we have an area planted in trees, probably won't be grazed for 5, 6, 7 years, especially by cattle. Sheep maybe could be introduced maybe in year 5. This is a huge part of this participant's farm. What he's trying to do is improve the resilience of his farm, that he has areas in the springtime, in the autumn, where maybe more vulnerable animals could be grazed around these trees. Now, it's slightly more long-term, and it's probably one of the deficiencies of our project. Maybe our project won't be continuing to actually see the benefits. I think I've actually covered a lot of this. There's so much more. There's just huge amounts of benefits in integrating agroforestry onto farms, but it has to be a flexible system. It has to work for the farmer, and it has to be not this idea of planting a hectare of trees and closing the gate and don't dare touch it for 20 years. We really have to get away from that language. Our white clover-based diverse swards, we saw the huge potential in this, and what we have found is our project probably has been slightly overtaken by this. It is now part of the REAP scheme. Some of our other participants have mentioned it. It's such a fabulous option for low-input farmers. It's extremely productive. It's extremely palatable. It sequesters carbon. It improves water infiltration. I just don't have time to go on, to be honest. Again, some of our recently established swards. That area is actually an upland. It's a green field, but at some stage it would have been reclaimed. Here we have the contrast between, on your left, a high input perennial ryegrass field and a diverse sward. The diverse sward has been proven to be more productive. It has been proven to give better livestock production. We really need to take this up in the farming community. So, again, I have covered that. Red clover, lifted largely from the organic scheme. Exactly the same benefits, low input, good for the environment, not transporting artificial fertilizers from all over the world to feed a crop. This crop feeds itself. There's such potential in this. We really need to grasp it. Again, I don't have time to go into it. That's a crop on our demonstration farmer's farm, James Breslin, who's actually with us today. It's fabulous. This crop, you actually hear it before you see it. The amount of insects and bees and pollinators that this supports, it's just fabulous. From James's perspective, it's probably the most productive sward on his farm, and it provides him with a protein-rich feed for his animals for the winter time. Finally, you'd be glad to hear our ponds. I don't really have to say much about the environmental benefits of ponds. In 2017, Inoculation was hit by huge floods, and it really brought it to the fore. What can we do about managing water on our farms? And I think the answer we're starting to see is we can actually do a huge amount. We can provide flood mitigation at a very low cost to the lowlands. We can provide water supplies for our animals on the farm. We can potentially provide micro-hydro generation. And even some of the stuff Fergal has mentioned. This is very simply done. Huge benefits. There's just no history of it, and it just needs a bit of support. So I'm back to where I started. We feel farmers can deliver environmental and climate objectives, and it doesn't have to be a cost at all the time to the farmer. And it's practical, innovative solutions that work for everybody. So thank you very much. I hope you found something of interest.
Henry, thanks a million for rounding off our speakers. Two things I think that Henry said there. Well, number one was benefit to the farmers and benefit to the environment. And we've really seen that today. The farmers are coming forward with solutions surrounded by all of this multi-actor group of people. But he also said another thing that really I thought about, and he said it makes sense. And sometimes when we, throw all of the research, throw all of everything out of the way, sometimes what makes sense, logical thinking, can really give us the answers that we need for the environment and for viable farming. And I think that's exactly what we've seen today. We've seen some wonderful examples, 5 of so many now we have. We have 23 in this crop of people and 23 plus 8 in the next round again, 24 plus 8. So we really have some unbelievable innovative kind of practices, ideas coming forward. But I think we have about 10 minutes or plus just to have a little bit of chat. We'll throw things open maybe a little bit to you guys down here on the floor and see have you any questions for the panel of people who have spoken. So I'm going to get David out on the stage as well. So this is where you can push in there. Let's push in further there. You'll get to see you a little bit more. Push in. Yeah. Okay. So anything, I suppose, that has hit home to you? Have you any burning kind of questions that you want to ask any of our panel here? These are the people really that have the ideas, that have the know-how. So I think we'll have a look around first of all and see. Yes, we have a gentleman here near the back. We have roving mics going around, being very conscious of COVID.
It's a bit like RT, this, but he's famous as well, My name is Brendan O'Malley. I'm a farmer from Connemara. I'm here today kind of representing with the Connemara, North and West Connemara EIP. I think it's not so much a question as a statement. I think we can take something out of every single thing that was said here. You look at Henry with the ponds and the swards and stuff like that. You look at the Danube project with the soil fertility. Look at the buckets from what Fergal is doing, from what Patricia's doing in the uplands there. And also, you look at the cattle grids, what you're doing there, that idea of the cattle grids. If every county council in the country put a cattle grid on the side of the road where roads come out onto the main roads, it would solve so much problems for farmers. And maybe there are ideas here, ancillary ideas that come out of these that are maybe not mainstream yet, but maybe into the future. And I think, when you look at it, they're all very diverse. Every project is different. But every project could reflect to me back on my farm. Every single one, every bit of what you're doing could revert back to me. And I think for me as a farmer, I'm doing a lot of it, but certainly I think there is huge learning and for the farmers in our area as well. Thank you.
Lovely. Excellent comment. I might get one of the panel to actually reply to that if you want. Patricia acknowledges that, Brendan. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Yeah, I think it really does, Brendan, you're right. It does epitomise everything, that's good about parts, elements. We may not be able to take everything from every project, but we can definitely take elements and parts. Another comment or a question again here in the middle. Thanks, Brendan.
Thanks, Brendan, and congratulations to each and every one of you that spoke up there. One of the questions I have is the national parks seem to be, spending a huge amount on the rhododendron control, yet we had the huge fires of last spring or whenever it was. Is there any comment on that particular issue? Thanks.
Yeah, I think we had a couple of speakers who spoke specifically about that. So I think if either one of you want to speak up, Fergal and Patricia.
Isn't a particular problem in the areas that we operate in. Invasive species like Japanese knotweed and Himalayan balsam are serious issues in our areas. But I think rhododendron has very specific soil requirements, and it's probably a bigger issue on the west coast where the soil is suited. So, Maybe Patricia might be...
Patricia, if you want to come in on that as well.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Martin, we've talked a couple of times about the rhododendron, the extent of rhododendron. Yeah, Killarney National Park have been tackling it for years, and there has been a phenomenal amount of money invested in there in trying to manage it. It's like everything else, guys. We had a talk the other day with our farmers the other evening on gorse management, on bracken management. Whatever you're dealing with, it's not going to be gotten rid of in a 4-year project. You need a long-term strategy for this. That's the sad news on it. But what we found, we're only operating, we're only a 4-year project. We were just due to be finishing actually in April next year. We have got absolutely phenomenal results because of the collective approach, bringing people together and giving them the skills locally. Because what we found is you can bring in contractors, a contractor can do a job for you, the contractor goes away. The problem is still going to come back with rhododendron because you're talking about an 8-year to 10-year phased approach to doing it. You have to do a primary clearance, you have to do a secondary clearance, and then you have to go back again. So it's not a quick fix by any manner of means, but it is absolutely doable because we've got phenomenal results. So don't lose heart, it's totally doable. The money and the longer term, what happens after we finish with the EIPs, that we don't know, and that's what concerns us because time is probably our enemy and the lack of time that we can devote to it. So I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Well said, Patricia. Well, no, some great thinking there as well, and I think that's where we're coming from today, this idea of carrying forward these lessons, funded or not. We have somebody else here in the middle. Great.
Thanks, Brendan. I could probably shout out as well as anything, but shall we go with the mic while I'm here? Just a quick question for David. I thought it's a fascinating project, the Danube project. I'm quite familiar with the others, and I think they're fantastic. Durrick McLaughlin is my name, by the way. I'm working on the Wild Atlantic Nature Life project. I'm just wondering, David, how do you see the Danube project upscaling, or how can your learnings be integrated from a bigger approach? You know, you've got your core of farmers and you've got your knowledge exchange and so on, but how can one look at a very large upscaling of that?
The external environment to Danube is very interesting at the moment, and I think a long way towards answering that question for you has been instigated by the Department of Agriculture in their putting together 10 million euros of funding for comprehensive soil tests, which go way beyond just N, P and K, and start looking at the trace elements and also the what's known as the cation exchange ratios. It's quite technical, but this is a huge step, and there's not many countries at a national level that have decided to take this step forward. And that emphasizes very clearly behind the scenes that there's deep thinking about and progressive thinking about where we need to go with this. Within 2-3 weeks of that program being announced, there's a total of 10,000 farmer places for it. 7,500 have signed up already. Now, the samples as such, well, there's nothing for free, but the samples are free as such, but they're free on the basis that you complete a nutrient management plan. Now, I know it's probably going to be taken up by a lot of more, and I don't like using the word commercial farmers, but I'm using the word commercial farmers in the sense of the farmers that derive most of their income from farming coming into the household, if you like, and are generally at a larger scale. Because the truth is they're the farmers that are causing the most problems from an environmental point of view, are potentially causing problems. And again, I don't want to be controversial about that, but you know, the facts speak for themselves. But I think this is an extraordinary move, and it's very forward-looking, and I think it's going to allow us then, and subsequently then, the question will be, how can we begin the process of getting information initially to farmers about adopting a new approach, taking a different mindset, because there's a huge distinction between information and knowledge. You can't really transfer knowledge, despite knowledge transfer. You can transfer information, but knowledge is something that you only personally can internalize for yourself, I believe. And I think the next step will be, and it's a cart that's out there, and in many respects that the department have put out there, and the funding is there for it, and it's going to go ahead. The tender is already got by the labs doing it. Now the horse is needed to pull the cart as to who's going to help the interpretate these results and make recommendations. As I understand it, very recently that tender has been awarded. I'm not entirely sure who it's awarded to, but that there is going to be support for these. So this is an excellent start. For ourselves as a project, our intention would be initially through discussion groups, existing discussion groups, but we're quite happy to consider taking a lot further. And what you really need are short, intensive soils courses as well. Intensive soils courses where there's a dedicated or a genuine interest to spend maybe 3 or 4 Monday nights in a row for 3 hours a night to sit down and start at the very start and actually thrash it out with a bunch of interested farmers. We've been involved in that prior to the start of the project, and it's been very successful, and we can do a lot ourselves.
Yeah. Excellent. Derek, yeah, again, the work of the LIFE projects as well is a huge part of our learning in and around innovation again. We have somebody right at the back, I think, there who has another question. And I suppose good to see, as David was saying, good to see, some of this going forward as well with new funding, new projects, new ideas.
I was just really interested, because it's something I don't know a lot about how do you measure the biodiversity? And David, you were saying about farmers are now seeing it and they're recognising it more, but I was just curious, even across all the projects, how you're actually measuring, so there's an increase in hedgehogs, there's an increase, I just don't know how that happens. I know we've talked a lot about how we measure soil and how we measure those type of things, and I suppose particularly I was interested in as well, you mentioned about the hen harriers and that their numbers had increased, I think you said by 8%. I was just wondering how many were there to begin with and how many are there now? I just think that's fascinating that you can do that. I just don't know how you do it.
Yeah, very good question. I see Fergal moving here already, getting ready to answer, so I'll pass it on to him.
We assess the 17,500 fields in the programme every year, and we assess them using a number of different scorecards. And those scorecards are a very similar structure to what's used in the Burren, and they consist of a series of multiple choice questions and, in some cases, a checklist. So those components of the scorecard measure different parameters of the field. So that could include plant biodiversity and structural diversity, in relation to field boundaries or sward structure. Now, in parallel with that, we do an annual hen harrier monitoring campaign, which starts in March when the birds are established in territories. The nest sites are identified, and we follow the progress of all of those nests through the season. And the information that we glean from both the monitoring campaign and the field assessments is used to inform all the other aspects of the project. So it creates a kind of a positive feedback loop that we use this information to help us and help farmers make better decisions on other aspects of the programme. In relation to the hen harrier numbers, one of the things we discovered is that hen harrier particularly hen harrier productivity is very variable on a year-to-year basis. So we had some very good year in the project in 2019 when we had 81 chicks fledged. Very poor year this year, I'm sorry to say, when we had only 35 chicks fledged. The number of pairs is up in the project. Number of confirmed nest sites is up 8% this year compared to the first year of the programme. You asked, I think it was 55 nests the first year, and up to 63 now, I think, or something like that. 58 up to 63. The number of hen harriers nationally outside of the SPAs, unfortunately, is a bit unknown. There was supposed to be there's a 5-yearly national survey, and it was scheduled to take place in 2020, but unfortunately, like so many other things, it had to be cancelled because of COVID, and it had to be cancelled again this year. But I understand that National Parks and Wildlife are keen to run it in 2022, public health issues permitting. So measuring the biodiversity for our program is quite limited to higher plants that are on the checklist. But, you know, between them and the use of the monitoring of a specialist predator, I think it's indicative of the ecosystem functioning. It's not definitive in relation to insects or other forms of biodiversity, but, you know, if we have good plant biodiversity and we have good numbers of specialist predator, I think it's a reasonable extrapolation to say that other biodiversity is doing well too.
Great. Fergal, thanks a million. I hope that answers. I think, have we another question? Yes, right at the back, we have another question.
Bridget Murphy from the Tullough Bio Soil Biodiversity Project. Fergal, you mentioned mob grazing as an innovation, and you were talking about commonages. And I was wondering, looking at that relationship, I mean, we know that 144,000 hectares of commonages are generally either overgrazed or undergrazed, but the management of them has typically led to the running down of those ecosystems. Any ideas on using mob grazing, which obviously differs from the standard practice in that obviously you're still putting the animals on, but the length of time that they stay on any particular area is the critical point. Any innovations, ideas of using that across commonages as a way of managing that landscape?
Well, one of the challenges with mob grazing is that you have to focus the grazing effort where it's required. But I think, as you were hinting at, it's not just the where the grazing effort is required, but also the when and the what type of grazing animal. Glad to see that Henry focusing on the value and importance of bringing cattle back. And cattle are very good if they're present in June and July. They're very good at defoliating millennia and preventing the build-up of litter, which is the fuel for next spring's wildfires. So focusing cattle grazing on specific areas in the landscape, kind of what firemen would call control points, that we can use to compartmentalise the landscape and prevent fires becoming landscape events, is very useful. Some farmers had a lot of concern about bringing cattle up into the mountains for the first time because of the perceived risk of red water. Now, we haven't encountered that, but it is a real concern for some farmers. So that was one of the reasons we experimented with horses. And certainly for the management of gorse, mob grazing by horses has been very effective in a way that grazing by cattle and sheep just aren't equipped to deal with gorse as a diet. Whereas horses, if they're there in February, no more than grazing the millennia in June, horses in February strip the bark off the gorse, and that's how they control it. So yeah, there is a lot of potential. One difficulty in commonage is there's multiple people involved, and the second difficulty is you need to contain the animals or focus their grazing effort, and fencing on commonages can be problematic in a lot of ways. So complicated but doable.
Great. Fergal, thank you very much. I think we'll take one more question, before we'll start to wrap it up. Okay, I think there's one more. Arish.
Right, Maura, while the Minister is here, she said there earlier on there was a possibility of an extension to the EIPs. I think it would be hugely important, given the fact that COVID intervened, if you like, and a lot of work couldn't be done. Meetings couldn't be held and stuff like that. And I think that is if there is a possibility there of an extension, it should be taken and it should be noted, I suppose, as well, to try and get that, because I think the value of all these EIPs is huge into the future. And also, just on the health and safety EIPs, they're 1 year, and it is very difficult to measure anything in a year. By the time you get a worker, a manager in, whatever you have to get in, it is very difficult. And perhaps they should be extended as well, into a longer period of time. Thank you.
Good point, Brendan, good point. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up at that. Again, I want to thank particularly Patricia, Henry, Owen, David and Fergal. They are 5 super wonderful examples of our projects, but I suppose they are examples. Everybody who has spoken here today, there are so many more projects out there, and I think that's what this is all about. It's about that multi-actor approach, it's about innovation, it's about the farmers coming up with the solutions to issues and coming forward with researchers, with advisory services, with county councils, with whoever, to find an answer to that. So I think we've had super examples. I think we'll give them another round of applause, will we? We will. And again, definitely some really good ideas to bring forward, carry forward the lessons learned. I'm sure the Minister will bring some of those to the table, as well as the Department of Agriculture here with us today. So, Goramila Magat, and thank you very much to all the people on the stage and to yourself. Thank you very much.